Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about observability, which is becoming a leading trend in enterprise IT. To discuss that, I'm joined by a very special guest. With me is Bill Staples, the Chief Executive Officer of New Relic. Bill, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, James. It's my pleasure to be here today.
Great. So I think even before we get to observability itself, we should take a moment and look at your career. You've done some interesting things. I believe you were a VP at Adobe. I think you were a vice president at Azure. So you've seen the marketplace. How did those experiences shape your approach to tech? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I've had the fortune to work for a number of great companies, as you mentioned, and it's been quite the ride. I've always been passionate about technology and its ability to really change the world, change our lives as consumers. Think about how much your life has changed over the last decade as smartphones and cloud have taken over so many experiences in your life, from connecting to your doctor, conversing with your friends, even high school friends, maybe on Facebook, or college
Right,
friends,
right.
to the way we now order food, to get home delivery, and
Sure.
everything else. And
Dating. I mean, the internet now helps us with our love lives, for goodness sakes.
it
Even that's
does.
not even new, right?
I've always just been, to me, it's magical, the power of software. And so to be part of it was always a dream. And
Mhm.
I think that the biggest thing that kind of shaped my career and led to me here to New Relic is over the course of the past few decades, I've built lots of technology, and some of it has been amazing and impacted millions, literally millions
Mhm.
of my customers, and
Sure.
others has gone absolutely nowhere.
Hmm.
And as I've gone through that journey, I've really started to think about, like, we all in our work want our work to matter. We want the effort we put into it to actually have an impact. And one of the lessons I guess I learned as I made my way through Microsoft and then Adobe and now at New Relic is to learn, how do you ensure that your work matters?
Hmm.
And one of the really key insights I found along the way is a really good practice to make sure you're on the right track and doing the right things is to take a data-driven approach. When you do the effort, if you take a little bit of time to measure its success, whether it had the intended effect that you desired, and
Right.
whether you're improving the situation or not, it gives you signal to then continue to iterate, refine, and improve. And so many times engineers haven't had the data to know whether the work they're doing is having the impact. So they spend an inordinate amount of time planning and writing code and delivering it to customers, only to find that their time was wasted.
Hmm.
So that's probably the biggest unlock, and that's what makes me so excited about observability and being
Hmm.
here at New Relic. Is it's I think of it as this like data-driven approach to engineering, helping you really hone in on what's important and how to have an impact.
Interesting. All right. Well, let's take a look at observability. I mean, I hear a lot about it these days. It seems like the last couple of years has been big. Let's take just a moment to explain what it is, because even though the term is used, I think not everyone knows exactly what it is. And of course, tech terms are often defined in different ways. What is observability, and what's driving the focus on observability these days?
Yeah, maybe I'll rewind, say 10 years ago, as the cloud sort of took off and engineers started building more complex applications. New technologies came to the market for building out these large cloud services.
Hmm.
There became a need to monitor those things, to really understand, are they up and available, and are they serving my customers' needs? And traditional monitoring applications were built. New Relic was famous for this. We launched the company in 2008 and launched what we call application performance monitoring in the cloud. That was our bread and butter. And we helped developers look at those applications. Other companies took different approaches, monitoring, say, the infrastructure or aggregating logs from systems. And they all kind of served a purpose. They targeted a specific area of technology, like applications for New Relic,
Hmm.
and they collected data from that space, from that technology, and brought it back to help developers and engineers understand, reactively, how is that thing doing? You could really understand the kind of the what, right? Like, is it up and running or not?
Right.
And then, if it wasn't at any point in time, you jumped on it and you tried to go figure out what was wrong and then get it back up and running for your customers. Well, over the last decade, that complexity has really exploded. The demand for digital has just, radically accelerated. COVID in particular, the last couple of years has really created a huge dependency for almost every company in every segment to have some kind of digital engagement with their customers. I mean, you think about even, the small mom and pop restaurants in your neighborhood, if they couldn't offer DoorDash delivery, if they didn't have their menus online, if they didn't, invest in some kind of digital, they were basically out of business for a long period of time while the shutdown happened, social distancing
Sure.
happened. And so every company has begun thinking about digital as a key channel for their business, which is then driving this increased demand for digital in the cloud and reliance on developers. And engineers are overwhelmed. They
Right.
cannot keep up with the demand for the creation and investment in those digital services. And what that's driven is this shift from monitoring, which you think of as a kind of this reactive practice, is it up and running and serving the customers, to observability, which instead of looking at one piece of the technology stack at a time, it attempts to aggregate into a full stack view all of your digital services and infrastructure, and it gives you a more proactive view on the digital system. So not only are they up and running, but how are they doing? And if something's going wrong, why is it going wrong? And to help you start to not just react to outages, but to build better software and improve the customer experience in a more proactive way with that data as the basis for the decisions you make.
If I'm correct, it's almost like observability. We used to look to IT teams before things got quite this crazily complicated. And now we need observability applications, observability platforms. It's almost as if we hired, 40, 50, 100 more IT pros to find out what's going on. But observability platforms are taking their place. Is that even vaguely accurate in terms of the description?
Yeah, it's I'd say in the past, in order to keep systems up and running, we would take a very kind of people and process intensive approach, right? Throw
Right.
more IT people at it, put more process around it. And what observability and DevOps trends in general are trying to do is move the responsibility for the health of the applications and the infrastructure increasingly earlier in the software lifecycle towards developers who build them. And instead of people and processes, bring the data and the automation to the developers so that they can build these systems with more intelligence and automate the operations of them so that they don't require so much manpower to keep up and running.
Right. Well, what then is your strategy for New Relic in the observability sector? Where will be going?
Yeah, so in light of those trends, we're really thinking about observability in, I think, a radical, different, new way than maybe how we got into this space. As I mentioned before, a lot of companies in this observability category got here through monitoring, including New Relic. We started with application monitoring. We added infrastructure and browser and mobile and logging over the years.
Mm-hmm.
But that still is really just a bundling of monitoring capabilities. And what the pivot that we did last year is really to go away from this application-centric approach where every part of your technology stack has a monitoring tool, and really to a data-centric approach. We think of this data coming from all of these systems as a really important source of truth that helps your engineering teams not just react to bad situations, but to think about the software and the customer experiences in a more proactive way. And essentially, it's a data-driven approach to engineering across the software lifecycle, not just when the software is running in production, but You use this data in the context of planning, how to go about building better customer experiences, in the process of coding and building the software itself, in the process of deploying and validating, as well as running and operating, where the sweet spot of observability is today. And we're really in the very early days of tapping into this data set and bringing it into context of that full lifecycle experience. So that's the big picture. We're a data-centric company. We think full lifecycle, and we think really developers first. We serve all functions in engineering, including IT and operations, but we're really trying to bring that data set earlier into the developer space because they're the ones that invent and create these experiences to begin with. And if we can bring the data to them, then they can do a better job at every turn of the life cycle.
Interesting. Yeah, it's compelling to hear you use the word data in that sense. It seems like if you wanted to describe the modern enterprise IT world, the one word would be data. Like all roads lead to data these days. Um, speaking of where all roads lead, let's look to the midterm future, the near term future. A few years out, I mean, what do you predict for the future of observability, and how can companies prepare now?
Yeah, I mean, it's not even the future. I think it's here today. The
Yep.
first thing I would say is observability is mission critical. We recently did a survey, 1,300 IT leaders, software engineers, developers across the world. We published it in the form of an observability forecast, and it was stunning. 90% of respondents that we surveyed said observability is critical to their success.
Ah, okay.
94% said it's critical to their role. When you see that kind of overwhelming embracement of a relatively new category, you know it's hot. And obviously, if you look at the companies in this space, you see incredible success, including New Relics, now that we've pivoted to this new model showing re-accelerated growth, which is really exciting.
Hmm.
But if you're in IT or you're in enterprise software and you're not yet adopting observability, you might be at this point starting to get too late. It's time to jump onto that trend.
Hmm.
In general, I think over the coming years, what we'll see is this need or this continued shift from observability being really monitoring and reactive, production-centric task to being a proactive task, as I said, across the software lifecycle, bringing this data set that comes from production systems and helping and letting it help you plan and implement better software. I also really believe, and we've shifted our strategy to accommodate this, that data-centric approaches versus the application ones of the past will the data-centric approaches will overtake the application-centric ones. The reason for that is when you have an application, it's built around a set of questions that you're trying to help the user answer, versus when you take a data-centric approach, you're allowing them to explore all the different questions that they may encounter, even questions they didn't think to ask when they started collecting the data. And so that broad ability for the data to impact in a positive way your engineering practice is going to be more compelling and more powerful than the traditional application-centric ones. And then I think, third, because of that, we're going to see massive consolidation and standardization on observability platforms. Today, it's a very fragmented ecosystem with different vendors, many different vendors, and many different playing in different spaces. And for an enterprise, ultimately, what's going to matter to them is all of my data in one place? Are all of my engineers looking at the same data and working collaboratively across that in that data-centric approach? And so that sets up this category for standardization and consolidation, another thing that we've invested towards. So excited for that opportunity.
Bill, I think you said it. It's going to be a very interesting sector to watch in the years ahead. Very much appreciate you sharing your expertise. Thank you.
James, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.